So this is Mr. Bill Lauritsen, who wrote the book The Invention of God, which is the subject of our talk today. And I'm Dr. Frank Bechtold, who's going to interview him. I just read the book 2 days ago. So, Mr. Lauritsen, if I summarize your book in saying that you think that volcanoes can explain lots of the features of religion.
Right. Yeah, my book has two parts. The first half of the book discusses volcanoes and how religion can be traced back to volcanoes, and the second part discusses oxygen and how religion can be traced back to that.
Yes.
So, and it's been a while since I read the book myself and wrote the book, so I'll have to remember as you're asking me.
Okay. So when was it written?
It was written actually in 1998 and 99, and then I went through some different formatting changes, and I took out some chapters, and then I republished it in about 2010 on Amazon. And I'm actually putting together a part 2 of the book, which is going to include the parts I took out. So yeah, you didn't get to read those, but those are, I think, just as interesting as this part.
It's very interesting, the book. You seem to be a multidisciplinary person.
Mm-hmm.
And this, some of your commentators I saw on the internet and on the back of the book say you're a Renaissance man. That is somebody who, like the Renaissance people, like to deal in many of the sciences that have been split now, and now we live in the world of specialists.
Yeah, I don't like to specialize. You're absolutely right. I like to. I'm interested in all areas of science, and I think, I don't know. I just have always been like that.
Yes, but as when you deal about a lot of sciences, then of course some of them you know better, some of them less.
Right.
And so, what are your areas that you are most comfortable with?
Me? That's a good question. Probably psychology. I used to teach psychology. I used to teach mathematics. I used to teach general science. Now I teach English as a second language. So those are some of the areas I've taught. But when I was in college, I had to study a lot of engineering subjects such as aeronautics, astronautics, general engineering, mechanics, physics, chemistry, things like that. So I have a very broad background. We talked about that once before.
Yes. You sound very much like an engineer. So
I think like an engineer, and I try to cultivate a scientific thinking.
So as we go along with the question, I think it would be interesting to state on different subjects how much one is involved in the subject, because I very much think that people's knowledge or interest is linked with the time and passion they spent on a certain subject. And we all have some subjects that we know very much and we're very much interested in, and some subjects that we are not interested in or that we just haven't taken time to do. So I think obviously the subject of volcanoes and the subject of psychology of the wild man, maybe, of the half-animal man, that are subjects that you are comfortable with, it seems, in the book.
Well, I don't call it the wild man, I call it the early humans.
Yeah.
Early humans. And, I got interested in geology or earth science because I lived in Southern California for 30 years, and there's constant earthquakes. And so you start, out of curiosity, you start, getting interested in what's causing the ground to shake. And so I learned a lot about that, and yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, I think so. It does. I think that the main subject of the book would be probably religion.
How religion got started.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of people try talk about the illogics of religion, like some famous writers like Dawkins and some of these other atheist writers talk about how pointing out the illogics of religion. But to me, I wanted to get to the root of religion, the real roots of religion, and find out how it started. And by doing that, really expose what it was. Try to expose what it was, so that it could have no ill effects on somebody. Does that make sense?
Yes, probably. I think that's the thing that
you're a doctor, so like if somebody comes to you and they're sick, a lot of times the doctors say, well, when did it start? Because it gives them a clue about I don't know if I want to call religion a disease, but I wanted to know what stimulus started it, you know.
In your view, what would be the importance of this discovery? Let's say you discovered it for yourself. Is if other people discovered the same, that is, that they would change their minds about religion, see that it is not as complicated as it seemed, that it comes from volcanoes and from certain conditions early in humanity. What would it change? What would it bring?
I think for me it was to free myself of any. People talk about religion sometimes having a bad effect on them. I know people, of course, talk about religion having a good effect on them. People do talk about that, but some people feel that religion has had a bad effect on them. But anyway, I wanted to find out the source of religion. Like, here's the way I understand it. If you understand something, it has less ability to affect you adversely. The more you understand it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sure. I had the impression that you wrote the book more like someone, like an inventor who discovers something. That is, that you swam in this water in Hawaii, then you thought, wow, maybe volcanoes could explain everything, and then let's go for this hypothesis. Let's try it. Let's go and see. And then you tried it, and you thought it was very explanatory. It could explain almost everything. So you said, okay, I'm going to lay down this hypothesis and share it, which doesn't... One thing that I found very good in the book is that you don't say it has to be true. It's true and all the rest is not true. You have a very engineer statement who says, well, I think, to my knowledge, my explanation is the simplest. So if we were in the scientific world, if we were in the engineer world, it would be considered the most useful explanation because it's the most simple one that does explain everything. There's others that could explain the same thing, but this is like extraterrestrial intervention could explain it, but mine is more simple. It doesn't need extraterrestrial beings, so maybe it's the best on hand right now. So it seemed to me that there was a kind of this sequence. You first have this kind of illumination when you swim in the volcano water, and then you have this engineering way of thinking that just tries it.
Let me tell you how the book actually started, okay? Because I was studying mathematics at the time, and I had discovered a certain sequence of numbers which are called highly composite numbers. And I wrote a paper about that, and I put it on the internet, and a lot of people were discussing it. Okay, so the way the book got started is back in about 1996 or so, actually even earlier. I was teaching some earth science. I think I was substitute teaching earth science, and I saw a map of the ocean floor, right? And I noticed this whole area around Indonesia was dry at one time, like about 10,000, 12,000 years ago. This was all dry. I thought, that's interesting. And at the same time, somebody sent me, I had mentioned Plato in one of my articles that I wrote, and this guy in Switzerland actually, a guy from Switzerland, sent me a message about a paper I'd written, and he mentioned Plato also. And so I got out Plato's book and I started reading it, and there's a whole section in Plato on the lost continent of Atlantis. Okay? So, at the same time, I read another author, Bucky Fuller, and he mentions when he was flying in Southeast Asia, he saw many canals from the air. And also in Plato, it mentions many canals. And I started thinking, well, maybe Atlantis was not in the Atlantic Ocean. Maybe it was in this area of Indonesia.
Yeah, that's the area here.
Yeah, here. Make it closer. Yeah, there.
This area here, between Indonesia and...
Yeah, down there. So I started investigating that hypothesis, and I found out that this is the most volcanic area of the world. These two islands, Sumatra and Java.
Yeah.
And
some light on it. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the most volcanic area in the world.
These two islands.
Java and...
these two islands, yeah. Most volcanically active.
Okay.
So, then, what I've discovered, the Egyptians were the ones who wrote about Atlantis. Okay, and here's Egypt. Yeah.
Here's Egypt.
And I found a reference that said the Egyptians thought the Atlantic Ocean was everything surrounding Africa. Okay, not just this, but it was everything surrounding Africa was the Atlantic. So Atlantis, according to that reference that I found, could have been in the Indian Ocean as well as the Atlantic Ocean. So, of course, as you read in my book, 2004, there was a huge tsunami that wiped out all of this area. There was a huge wave that wiped out all this area. And I think a similar thing happened at some point in the past, which gave rise to this legend of Atlantis. And it's going to be in my next book that I'm going to write about. I took it out of this book because, I don't know, I felt it was a bit too controversial, so I took it out. But anyway, so the next book will actually be a prequel to this book. Prequel.
Yes.
What came before this book.
I see. Yes, I thought it was not maybe very interesting to talk about the content of this book because there is some other things on the internet about the summary of the book, maybe.
There's a summary in my book?
Yes,
Oh.
which you did.
Oh, okay.
On YouTube there is a
oh, right.
a two
Video.
episode video.
Yeah.
Yes, that explains your book.
You watched it?
Yes. I
Oh,
watched
okay.
it, yeah. And so I think it's pretty much possible what you say. So I'm not sure. I would like to argue with that.
Okay.
I'd like to take it a little further, or in some areas that I thought were interesting that you don't go further into the book.
If I
in the
know
book.
the answer,
So,
I'll tell you.
Yes. So, for instance, that was one of them, the origin of humanity. Another one would be that you explain in the book that a lot of mythologies arise from the fight between a volcano god and a
The sky
god.
god, yeah.
And that the reason for that is that when a volcano erupts, there is a lot of lightnings
Volcanic lightning.
provoked by the volcano. But that for an ancient mind that doesn't know that the volcano does provoke the lightnings, it looks like a fight between some air power, that would be the lightnings, and a volcano power. And you mentioned that this fight with a winner and a loser usually did influence a lot of mythologies. And in that respect, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you would say that the Egyptian mythology would be a first fight where the volcanic god loses, but then a revenge or a second set where the volcano god wins.
Right. You had Osiris the god of the underworld, against Seth, which was the god of storms, and then you have the lightning, and then Osiris is blown into many pieces, so that's the loss, and then his son Osiris's son Horus comes and replaces him, and the same thing happens with the volcano when for example, the volcano Krakatoa, when it explodes, there's now a new volcano coming up, and that has happened apparently many times in the past. So you have a resurrection situation, which I think influenced the resurrection in Christianity. I think that's where the Christian resurrection comes from, is this idea of the volcano exploding and then a new one coming in its place. So, yeah,
And
it's very important.
So Egypt would have a mythology where the volcano loses and then wins, and then Greece would have a mythology where the volcano loses.
Oh, because Zeus was
Yes.
Zeus was the primary god.
Yes.
You're saying yes.
Well, the god of yes.
I think that's a good insight. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, it seems Zeus being the primary god of the Greeks and later the Romans, Jupiter would be like the winner. But in Egypt, the primary god was always Osiris. And of course, you had Re or Ra, the sun god, was very important too, but actually not as important as Osiris.
So then the Greeks, for example, of which we come, maybe is thought,
Our thinking,
are
A lot of our
are
thinking.
less a volcano god because it's a beaten volcano god. It's an air god who took power and who vanquished the volcano god. And in Egypt, for example, it wouldn't be. Do you think that there is a lot of influence, like some cultures are more influenced by a earthly thinking, like a volcano thinking, and others are more influenced by a pure thinking or etheric thinking or whatever you can call it?
I think that's an interesting point, that you could probably classify religions along that line. I hadn't actually
thought about it.
Thought about that. But like the Vikings, Thor. Thor was the god of lightning, the god of the sky. And
they would be like the Greeks.
Yeah. But then the Egyptians are more earthly, and you have you have the pyramids, which represent basically volcanoes, the earth, right? The pyramids. Yes. And then, let's see, maybe the Mayans or Aztecs would be more of an earthly god, because they had the pyramids also. But of course, even the Egyptians had their stars, and everybody had the planets as very powerful gods. So maybe I don't know, maybe there's always this conflict between the sky and the earth, and then humans are, like I said, in the middle. In the book, they're kind of in the middle. The middle, like in China, is called the Middle Kingdom. Between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of the earth, you have the Middle Kingdom. And in Egypt, you had the unification of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, which I think represents the sky and the earth. So, but that's a good point you make, though.
Would there be, because in the mind of most people, I think, including mine, most gods are from up. From the sky.
Oh, right, because we're
sky.
from that.
And then
from that whole.
If there is gods in the underworld, then they are lesser gods, or they are devils. They are the bad ones.
Well, but that's our culture.
Yes,
that's our culture.
But it would also be it would be the Viking culture, the Greek culture. It would be also the Mayan culture, no? Because I think in your book you say that the Quetzalcoatl, or what's his name, is the thunder god still wins. And then even the Egyptian gods, you wouldn't. I mean, what I understand of your book is not really that the volcano god won. It was even, more or less.
Well,
the volcano god loses, then wins, and then they fuse. It's not really a culture with a underworld domination.
But the pharaoh was put into the pyramid, inside the pyramid, to become one with Osiris, the god of the underworld. So there is a definite strong earthly influence there.
Stronger than the sky.
And
There's
look
an
at
imbalance.
and look at even in our modern culture. What do we do when somebody's dead? We often bury them in the ground. Whereas, for example, in India, they're burnt to free their soul, into the back into the spirit world. You know?
It still seems in your book that the origins of religion are of an earthly god, but that then most cultures switched to a sky god. That means that's the
I can't agree though with that totally, because I mean, imagine if you're a hunter-gatherer or a primitive human. I mean, look at the forces you have around you. You have the sun, you have the moon, you have the stars, and those are definitely going to influence you. But then you also have the shaking of the earth, and you have the lava coming out, and those are going to influence you. So I think you're going to see both these. I don't think you can say one would always dominate, although in some cultures maybe maybe it does, like you mentioned with the Greek and Thor. I mean, no, that was the Viking and Thor, the Greek and Zeus.
Yes.
So yeah,
I want to take advantage of your multidisciplinarity in this respect and ask you if you think that the mythology that is more earthly is less likely to produce science than the mythologies that is more skyly.
I don't think so.
I will try to make my point. Is not science, or the modern, as we understand it, the modern science, easier if you take a simple environment? That is, if you take an earthly environment, it's too complicated. You have to make an artificial environment where only, for example, one thing varies, and then you start to understand. Like, for example, you only vary the temperature, or you only change the pressure, and then you understand.
So you're
that
saying
would
you
be
think
more
that the
like
sky is simpler?
the sky is simpler because it's empty. It's more, it's more clear, crystal clear. It's more simple,
but
probably.
no, that's a good point. But the Earth is more accessible.
Yes.
So you can't go up to Jupiter and check it out. But when there's a volcano, you can go up to it and you can get the sulfur and you can start doing experiments. And out of that came the alchemists. You see, so from the earth gods you have alchemy, which developed into chemistry, and then from the sky gods you had astronomy and physics coming, I think, somewhat from those. So, I think they both had an influence.
Yes. Probably because we always live on Earth, so we have to do it on Earth.
Well, yeah, it's accessible.
But which kind of thinking? Maybe it could be then that the fact that we live on Earth gives us this earthly part anyways. So then if we want to be complete beings, we need a skyly mythology to be both. If you're on Earth and have an earthly mythology, you're just earthly. You don't have this insight, or this taking a step back.
But remember from my book that when the ancients burnt a human, they found it disappears into the air. So they developed this whole idea that we are not just earth, but we are also made of the sky, or of this air, or of the spirit, what they call the spirit, that we have a strong component of that part.
Sure.
So anyway, go on. These are great questions.
Yeah. There was another point that I was thinking of, is maybe you partly answered this question, is what is religion made of? You said you were looking for the roots, and so that would be maybe already the answer to my question. I'll ask it anyways. Is, could we say that the faces in the religion, the actors, are the volcanoes, are the oxygen, but then that is only the small part of religion. The real substance of religion is more interactions between human groups.
Oh,
that is
modern religion.
That is that. No, even ancient religions. That is that. For example, if you say if you see the commandments, or the things that religion tries to teach us, or to make us not forget, there's not many things like you say about the dangers of a volcano. The most prevalent things are don't be too self-confident. Don't lend money for interest. Don't. There are many of these rules. Don't kill. Don't be mean. I mean, there's a lot of these things. You can imagine where they come from. It seems that for a human society, the biggest danger is not volcanoes, is the human behavior in a group.
Okay, well, let me talk about this, because that's a very good point. I think at one time, prior to 10,000 years ago, humans lived in small bands of hunter-gatherers. We think about 100 to 150 people, and they were on like a camping trip, basically going here and there and gathering food and hunting. And that was a completely different environment than today. So at that time, they're out in nature, they're going to be looking at nature, you're going to be very much aware of the nature gods, the stars and the moon and the earth. And now, after about 10,000 years ago, you have the beginning of agriculture. Okay, in the Nile River and many other of the great river civilizations. Now you have large groups of people living together, and you have to have some rules of behavior. Okay, and I think that's when this nature religion was kind of changed and actually taken out of nature and put into churches or pyramids or whatever, and kind of taken by the rulers, I think, in many cases, and try to keep the people from killing each other and get along with each other and that kind of thing.
So,